welcome to this important seminar organized by HeritageAlive in cooperation with NAKS Suriname and the Norwegian Crafts Institute and the Persian Garden Institute for Living Heritage. My name is Inga-Lill Sunset. I'm head of the Cultural Heritage and Museums at Arts and Culture Norway. I think the urgency of our meeting today cannot be overstated. There have been numerous conflicts in recent years, leading to the displacement of many people, both internally and externally. And these conflicts have had a profound impact on intangible cultural heritage and its bearers. However, we have also witnessed the resilience and crucial role that intangible cultural heritage can play during such turbulent times. So I'm quite happy to that we are a lot of people here today, and also to hear a lot of sharing of reflections and experiences, so we can aim and develop recommendations on how the legal framework of safeguarding intangible cultural heritage in this situation can be applied more effectively. So I welcome you again all, and I'm happy to hear about all these important experiences. And I wish you all a nice and enlightening seminar.
Thank you, Inga-Lill, and thank you for to the Norwegian Arts and Crafts for hosting us. That's really important. And there, everyone, great to see all of you here. And welcome to today's webinar on intangible cultural heritage and armed conflicts. My name is, as many of you know, Eivind Falk, and I'm the chair of HeritageAlive, the NGOs journal for sharing experiences from the field. As most of you know, HeritageAlive is one of the working groups under the NGO Forum, and in cooperation with NAKS Suriname, the Norwegian Crafts Institute, and the Persian Garden Institute for Living Heritage, all three NGOs accredited by UNESCO, we are organizing an online conference with a presentation of case studies from NGOs operating in the regions concerned. For this event, a particular thanks goes to Arts and Culture Norway, which is the focal point for the 2003 convention, and who has helped us with the technical support for this event. A big thank also go to my two partners in crime, which is Janet Blake and Rachel Jeffrey, for the planning and the organizing and for making this event happening and come through. And of course, a huge thank to today's presenters. Unfortunately, we did not have the possibility to include all of the proposed contributions we have received due to the limited time frame for today's meeting. So we had to make, and I'm sorry to say, we had to make a very painful selection. But a great thanks goes to all of you who were willing to share your experiences. Hopefully, we can materialize this important subject in a publication where there will be room for more case studies. And we are currently looking into this possibility together with our partners in ISHCAP. So we already have a good dialogue on this possibility. We can come back to that later. Unfortunately, this subject of this meeting is of a very urgent one nowadays, with the conflict situations in many countries and a large number of people being displaced. And today we will have several current examples of how war and other conflicts could have a huge impact on the communities, the practitioners, and the bearers and the living heritage concerned. At the same time, we have witnesses how ICH could play an important and crucial role during armed conflicts, with its focus on the role of NGOs in safeguarding ICH in armed conflicts, The webinar will also share reflections and experiences and combine this in a proposal providing recommendations on how the legal framework for safeguarding ICH in armed conflict situations could be applied more effectively. If you have comments or if you have questions on the way, please write it in the chat, and then we will save it for the last part of the program, and where we will summarize everything. So please don't be shy. Write your comments on the way, and Rachel will take care of it in the best way. So with these words, I would like to give the floor to Janet Blake, which is the today's keynote speaker. Most of you know Janet very well from before, and I'm sure you know her quite well. She played an active role in when the 2003 convention was written, and she has been an active member of the NGO Forum for many years. She will talk about safeguarding ICH in armed conflicts, a growing challenge for the international community, and to find effective responses and the role of the NGOs. So, dear Janet, the floor is yours.
Hello and good afternoon. My sincere apologies for not being present in person, but sadly I'm going to be somewhere that I can't have access to Zoom at the time of the meeting. Just very quickly, my thanks go to Eivind and to Rachel for their great cooperation between our three NGOs for putting this meeting on, and also, of course, to HeritageAlive, who are providing their umbrella for the whole process, and finally to the Norwegian Heritage Authority for supporting the technical aspects of the meeting. As you see here from my title, I'm looking at how this question of safeguarding ICH in armed conflict is a real challenge facing the international community. How can it find effective responses? And of course, importantly, what is the role of NGOs in this? I'm just trying to get my slides to move. Yes, here we go. So we, of course, have this whole architecture of international humanitarian law, the rules of war, which is very old law, generally. It does include, of course, the 1954 UNESCO Hague Convention for the protection of cultural heritage in wartime. But this has been focused mainly on the material aspects of the heritage and hasn't really had a focus on ICH as such, although ICH can be protected by it. So, for example, cultural, religious buildings, if they're protected, that may well protect aspects of ICH. Also, the protections that do exist for civilians and civilian objects may also extend protection to ICH. But I think what we have to do is move from this incidental approach to safeguarding ICH and its bearers to a much stronger imperative to do so. And, you know, we're holding this meeting with the sad reality around us of many ongoing conflict situations worldwide, some of which may be not regarded as armed conflicts per se, but are situations of serious lack of security for people, and of some of which have been ongoing for decades as well, and some of which are not receiving very much attention from the international community, or at least from the international media. Extreme suffering, as we know, is caused by modern warfare, and unfortunately, civilians tend to bear the brunt of this, particularly vulnerable civilians and women and children, who are very seriously affected by the loss of human security from displacement or from the destruction of the environment around them, lack of access to food and water, healthcare, etc. And we should remember that ICH, of course, is directly impacted negatively by armed conflict, as are the civilian bearers. but at the same time, it can serve as a resource both to prevent conflict, but also to help people during the displacement and post-conflict situations to rebuild their societies and their culture and find their own place within them, which is really important. As mentioned, civilians are disproportionately affected, and here we see some pretty shocking statistics concerning the impacts of armed conflict. I should mention that that statistic of 122.6 million people worldwide is not just specifically armed conflicts, but includes other forms of political and physical violence and lack of human security. But all in all, armed conflict is really the main reason for this, and is often the reason for these other breakdowns in society and protection of people. And this, of course, has important implications as to how we safeguard ICH during and after armed conflicts. Now, in this sense, ICH is a rather special form of heritage because it's the one that is located in human beings and in their society and social relations. It's what people carry with them when they are displaced as a result of armed conflict. And so when we're considering safeguarding it in armed conflict, a major part of that must be focusing on the protection of civilians and civilian objects, but in conflict zones, but also as displaced persons and refugees. And I think this raises for our convention an important question, which is how the states parties that are receiving states of refugees, how they protect and safeguard the ICH of those refugees. Sorry, I've just moved without meaning to from one slide to the other. So here we have a picture of the element of the Mandan Charter from Mali, which is one of the oldest constitutions, an oral constitution from the 13th century, which is very much aimed at keeping the peace, social peace, through, interestingly enough, diversity, respect for diversity, as well as protecting food security and preventing slavery. Sadly, of course, today Mali is one of those countries facing ongoing armed conflict, very often as a result of neighboring countries' instability. Now, if we look at the 2003 UNESCO Convention definition of ICH, we understand some important points. First of all, that although, of course, it's primarily those intangibles, you know, the knowledge, the skills, the know-how, the practices, it also includes material objects that are instruments, artifacts, tools, as well as cultural spaces. So to some degree, the protection of material heritage in wartime does also encompass ICH, but only part of it. It's also, as it says here, constantly recreated by the communities and groups in response to their history. And as we know, that history is often a history of conflict, or interestingly, a history of living together after conflict, which I think we should bear in mind. It provides communities and groups with a sense of identity and continuity. This is exactly the way that ICH can support displaced communities enormously to rebuild their societies. But also it must be compatible with requirements of mutual respect among communities, groups, and individuals, meaning, apart from anything else, we have to be careful not to be working with ICH that itself may lead to further conflicts. I don't have time to go into any detail on this slide, but this just reminds us that in the operational directives to the convention, we do have references that are relevant to the role of ICH in preventing and resolving disputes and in peace building to ensure a long-lasting peace, which is important. But we haven't developed this idea sufficiently yet. Now, here I have included the safeguarding actions that are set out in Article 2, Paragraph 3 of the Convention. And as you see, I've coloured in the majority of them as ones that I think, when we're thinking about safeguarding ICH during armed conflict, or possibly in the pre-conflict peacetime scenario, these can all be very relevant. Why do I colour identification? Because, and in fact, I should have coloured the next one, inventory, because the recognition of ICH elements before an armed conflict starts can also be an important part of its safeguarding during the conflict situation. Preservation, of course, it's perhaps the primary one during armed conflict. Protection, perhaps here would speak to the legal protection, the international humanitarian law framework. Promotion, very much, which is about respect. It's about people recognizing the importance of this heritage, even in armed conflict. Transmission, of course, one of the really key things is to protect and support the communities of this heritage to be able to continue to practice and transmit it during these situations, which may be very long term. I mean, even if an armed conflict itself is not a long-standing one, but the post-conflict, the displacement and the post-conflict situation could go on for a long time. And revitalization, of course, to not just keep it being practiced and transmitted, but to do other active supporting measures that will make sure that it continues into the future. So, given that the picture is often quite a negative one when we were talking about this topic, I did want to suggest that also ICH can offer us a bit of hope. And if we take the example of the Korean Peninsula, where there is this sort of long-standing Cold War, you have a situation in 2013, 2015, where first the Republic of Korea and then the Democratic People's Republic of Korea inscribed kimchi making independently on the representative list. But then you have in 2018 the interesting situation where they made a joint inscription of traditional Korean wrestling, which suggests, a little, as I say, glimmer of hope that ICH can at times help to be a bridge between societies, communities that have other forms of conflict going on. I know it's only a small thing in a much bigger picture here, but it's still, I think, a reason for some optimism. When we're addressing this question of ICH and armed conflict, I think we do have to really also think about who are the main actors and stakeholders. And here I've broken them down a little bit, perhaps in terms of the humanitarian law viewpoint, but this can be helpful. It's a complicated picture, as we know. And so the various actors that we can identify are, of course, combatants, who are members of government military forces, but also members of less official militias, possibly terrorists and or freedom fighters, which rather depends on your political viewpoint, other informal fighters and others who get involved in the fighting. And of course, they are the primary subjects of the humanitarian law in terms of those whose actions are controlled and prohibited. Then, of course, you have the non-combatants and civilians who are the protected persons under humanitarian law. They don't take part in the hostilities and they're not part of any armed group or armed force. And they, of course, that is where we find our bearer communities that we're seeking to protect and support. But another interesting and important one are social institutions such as schools, hospitals, religious organizations, charities, and so on. Interestingly, some of these have special protection also under humanitarian law. And at the same time, they're very often important hubs where civilians gather, and in fact, places possibly where they practice their ICH, even within a conflict scenario. Of course, humanitarian actors who may be local humanitarian charities or international ones. And of course, the international humanitarian organizations can be split into those that are governmental, such as government aid bodies, or equally the non-governmental international charitable organizations, which play often a very major role. And then, of course, there are the other non-governmental organizations that are not primarily perceived as humanitarian, and that's perhaps where most of us come in, but that are active on the ground, either in the conflict zone or quite likely working with refugees in camps when they're displaced, and other civil society actors who, of course, might include community organizations of the bearers themselves. And why I present this slide is because I think it's really important that we look at this picture and we don't just focus on, you know, ourselves, the NGOs and the bearer communities, but that we look at all of us in this bigger picture of all the other actors. And this is where we'll be hearing later from Anna about training the military in Poland. And that tells us something about these kind of relationships are important. Now, my next slide, I've included because I think this is one really very interesting example of where we have seen in the work of the 2003 Convention a real recognition of this connection between ICH safeguarding and building peace. It's a safeguarding strategy of traditional crafts for peace building that was inscribed on the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices in the name of Colombia in 2019. And what this program is about is creating, as it says, links between traditional crafts and skills and, of course, the artisans who hold that knowledge, and bringing them together with apprentices who are young people from 14 to 35 years of age who have become vulnerable as a result of a very long-standing internal conflict in the country, who may well, some of them, be ex-fighters among them. And through transmitting the heritage skills, they also are encouraging these people to have both to be strengthened in the face of their vulnerability, but also to become peace builders themselves. Such an interesting connection here. And I note that the nomination file says it was carried out through a cooperation between directors, stakeholders, knowledge bearers, apprentices, and graduates of the three of the oldest of these centres, as well as naming some community groups in the nomination file. Now, why I mention this is that the word in non-governmental organisation doesn't appear in the file, but I suspect that NGOs were definitely part of that picture. And it's, as I say, it's a really good example for us to have in front of us. Now, I don't want to take your time. You have some really interesting presentations coming up where the experiences of our fellow NGOs and members of the forum from Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Colombia, from Palestine, from Uganda and Poland are shared. I finished by drawing attention to this picture on the bottom of the slide, showing the tradition of Nabulsi soap making in Palestine, which has recently been inscribed on the representative list. And it just reminds us, as I said, that people are doing their ICH, even in the most extreme circumstances. And that is something that we should value and seek to support and find ways that it can really make a change in the lives of people who are impacted by armed conflict. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all a very successful meeting. And I stopped sharing so that you can actually see me, because I have a feeling that when I show my slides, you couldn't. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. Goodbye.
Thank you, Janet, for this wonderful, very valuable presentation. It was a very good start on our webinar, and very good introduction to our next speakers. And our next speakers it's Alexander Burchenko and Valentina Demian. And as you know, they are representing in the accredited NGO Democracy Through Culture from Ukraine. And as most of you are aware of, it is an extremely challenging situation for Ukraine these days due to the brutal Russian invasion. So let me give the floor to our colleagues Valentina and Alexander. And I'm so happy due to your difficult situation and that you are able to be here with us. So please, Alexander and Valentina, you can share your presentation now.
Thank you. Just a moment, I shall share my. Thank you very much. Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Janet, for a very good introductory and comprehensive introduction to our topics. And I would like to start. Sorry, Valentina is now busy with some other conference here because we use this free time to make a lot of things, quiet time. So we represent NGO Development Center Democracy Through Culture, which acts as a think and do tank in the sphere of culture and cultural heritage, especially intangible cultural heritage and local development. Since 2014, the center has examined the impact of emergencies, especially armed conflict, on the intangible cultural heritage and the role and capacity of living heritage in such situations. For example, on 16-17 September 2019, we walked in Severodonetsk, Lugansk region, now occupied, as well as Severodonetsk, making the banner exhibition Intangible Cultural Heritage as a tool in peace building and resilience, based on the experience of Colombia mentioned by Janet now. It was a moving exhibition which traveled around Ukraine, and during this exhibition we discussed not only experience of Colombia but also ICH of Ukraine, and speaking about the possibility how to use ICH in emergencies. Since 24th February 2022, we focus on the issue ICH safeguarding in time of war, working with different communities all around Ukraine where it's possible. This we would like to outline briefly some of our observations about ICH in war conditions, as well as some challenges and open questions we have met during this last year. First of all, communities finding themselves in hard situation, surrounded, shortened of electricity, communication, gas or food supply, apply to the traditional knowledge acquired during generations. Some examples, for example, once more mentioned by Janet, borscht. It's a traditional Ukrainian dish, but after the beginning of war, it was a problem how to prepare this dish using products not from the shops or food chain supply, but from vegetable gardens, natural spaces, and how to prepare it on open fire, not only on the front line, but also in some of our cities. So it was a retaining, and it was supported to survive and became a symbol of resilience. The second example is the Kobzar, Bandura, and Evil art. It, like 300 years ago, when Bandura players inspired Cossacks Today, Bandura and Kobza players support militaries, combatants often on the front line. And they said humor is an integral part of Ukrainian tradition. It helped to survive in the hardest time, including famine, atrocities of the Second World War, and Soviet power persecutions and repressions. Some of them are traditional witchcraft. Legends and beliefs about witches have revived in humoristic histories about the impact of modern occupants, like some histories about war mosquitoes or war geese, which is very popular not only in Ukraine now. Communities displacing. Yeah.
Just a moment, Alexander. We cannot see your slides. We can only see the first page of your presentation. Your slides is not changing.
Yes. Something.
So can you try to open your slides on the way?
Just a moment. Once again, okay. Well,
because you are still on the first slide there. Is that for everyone?
No, it's...
Yes.
It is for everyone. I think that Alexander could just reconnect the presentation.
Or just go to the slideshow mode.
Yeah, the slideshow, that's what I was going to say, but the slideshow mode might as well stick.
What's slideshow mode? Okay.
There you go.
Oh,
there we go. It
okay.
is already. It's changing now.
Okay, super. Now you can continue. Sorry.
Now we were here. Now it's changing, yeah? Okay. Well, can I continue, yeah?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Communities displacing in other parts of Ukraine or elsewhere unites around the manifestation of intangible cultural heritage. So one example is satir ritual bread prepared in the village of Azov Sea region, close to Mariupol. There are some villages called Orzov, Mangish, or Yalta, where Greek national community in Ukraine live. And so it's from this spot now occupied and mainly destroyed. Communities, they live in different parts of Ukraine, especially in Kyiv. So they gather to continue and to transmit the knowledge. One of its knowledge, it's the ritual bread, satir, which is symbolized crucifixion and crown of thorn of Christ. It's bread prepared for Easter. But not only this intangible cultural heritage element, but also other food and some traditions. And they help to gather people from these communities. And they organized in Kyiv now so-called hubs of resilience, calling them I'm Mariupol, and they transmit the knowledge for other generation, for young generation, including some discussion about the future. And for example, within 3 weeks, local museum from Mariupol also will open exhibition in Kyiv, presenting pisanka from Mariupol or painted egg. Easter painted eggs from Mariupol. Now I would like to speak about some problems or open questions. The war divided communities by two opposite parts, in Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia regions, where some people, bearers, remained in Ukrainian part, as in occupied part. And the question is, if those, as we have been asked a lot of times, who remained in occupied territories, continue practicing Ukrainian or other heritage, what should be safeguarding policy in this case? And also, is it a risk for them continuing practicing Ukrainian intangible cultural heritage. It's not like the case of Korea mentioned by Janet, but it's other thing, and it's also open question, and we are seeking how to find some answer for this question. Destroyed cultural and natural spaces. Above 7,500 cases of natural spaces damages were registered in Ukraine now. Destroyed, burned, or mined forests and meadows, poisoned rivers. For example, the river of Desnats running from northern part of Ukraine to Kiev, exploded dams like Kakhovka Dam, eliminated plants, animals, birds, and fishes. All of these are related closely with intangible cultural heritage. How can we assess losses of ICH which relates it with cultural and natural spaces? Will it remain the same heritage after changes? And our surveys of communities stressing about that another aspect in ICH close assessment, including casualties, deaths of bearers, erasure of memory. The same we can say about cultural spaces. We have very sad statistics by April 2025. More than 1,420 monuments are damaged or destroyed in 18 regions of Ukraine. We have now 24 regions. And in 18 regions, we have these numbers. 2,233 cultural institutions are damaged or destroyed, and 410 are destroyed completely. That is 18% of all their number. And they include clubs or cultural centers, libraries, religions, temples, churches, cathedrals, synagogues, mosques, sacred space, cemeteries, and many other. I mention it because it's also, we are speaking about intangible cultural heritage, but it's impossible to imagine intangible cultural heritage without these spaces. And concluding, I would like to speak about some set of questions in ICH safeguarding, and open questions and challenges. First of all, the war in Ukraine exposed a set of this question. For example, decontextualization. Is it a risk or opportunity? Because in some cases, the uprooting of context is an efficient way now to preserve and attract attention to ICH safeguarding, because it's really impossible to present these elements of ICH in the proper context. Complex ethic issues, empowered or enforced communities, raising awareness for living heritage and stimulating communities to define and submit their ICH to regional or national lists. It is a trigger for some competition between them. It's also some risk for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. And maybe the lost assessment, how to do it in the sphere of intangible cultural heritage. What are objectives? How it is compliant with national and international law? And many other questions which we are meeting every day. They are open, and I would like to address it to all of you, because to find the solution, it will be very important. And the way mentioned once more by Janet, they are very universal, but it's necessary to find out some specific solution, not only for specific country, but for specific communities, as we have seen in Ukraine. Well, in general, it's all. Thank you for your attention, and the last slide where you can find out some information about us and please connect us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for your very important and valuable contribution and intervention to this to our program today. Our next NGO presenting their case study is from Kyrgyzstan, and it's from Agin Cultural Research Center. And their topic is the impact of the recent armed conflicts along the Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan border on the intangible cultural heritage of the Kyrgyz communities living in the region. And in this case, there are no less than 4 presenters. It's Gulnara Aitaeva, Aisa Abdirahmanova, Ruslan Sunosov, Mirlan Suldushabaev. So Gulnara and Aisa and all, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this nice introduction, Evin. Good time to everyone. Yes, I am Gulnara Aitaeva. I am the research lead for this project, with the result of which we will briefly present. And thank you very much for all the organizers for this opportunity. Let me introduce the team working on this project. It's Aiza Abdirahmanova, the coordinator, Mirlan and Ruslan, they are field researchers. So we are all 4 involved in this project, which is in this presentation, which is called Borderland Craftspeople Between Survival and Adaptation. Let me briefly introduce you to historical and cultural context of this issue. Modern Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are 2 post-Soviet countries located in Central Asia, and they inherited disputed borders from the Soviet time. At that time, the borders between Soviet republics were loosely defined, and this led to decades-long territorial conflicts. The 2 countries have distinct linguistic roots, Turkic and Persian, but both countries share Soviet influences that continue to shape their governance, economics, and cultural identities. Kyrgyz-Tajik border conflicts has a long history. Major recent border clashes occurred in 2019, 2021, and 2022, causing displacement, destruction, and loss of life. Land and water disputes fueled tensions mostly. However, fortunately, in March 2025, in March 13, 2025, 2 governments announced a final agreement marking an end to the long-standing border conflict. And you can see a very new picture from the Nowruz, which was celebrated just a few days ago, where Tajik and Kyrgyz women became jointly celebrating this event.
IGNA-CRC's Inventory of Traditional Crafts. Since January 2025, IGNA-CRC has been documenting traditional crafts across Kyrgyzstan, supported by UNESCO HK. Fieldwork in Batken province revealed strong connection between craftsmanship, displacement, and resilience, leading to a new focused study on border village artisans. Batken is one of the poorest and most remote provinces in Kyrgyzstan. It has a rich handicraft traditions, including oymocholuk, traditional Kyrgyz ornamentation, saymacılık, embroidery, dilemçilik, carpet weaving, giyişçilik, felt making, tirmekçilik, rope braiding, and kurakçılık, quilting. Local craftsmanship is deeply integrated into daily life, particularly through sep, dowry preparation. Research methodology and key interviews. For the new focus research, IGNA-CRC developed 17 interview questions to explore how conflicts affect craftsmanship. 12 artisans from the communities of Aksai, Koktash, and Karabakh villages, including 10 women between the ages of 42 and 67, spoke about their experiences with displacement, adaptation, and traditional crafts knowledge transmission.
Mirlan. Okay, our researchers are still in the field. Probably they do not. Let me continue. So conflicts impact on craftsmanship and cultural heritage. In 2022, artisans lost homes, tools, and inherited materials, disrupting intergenerational craft transmission. Particularly vulnerable traditions include knowledge of making supara, which is tent hide for food preparation, and pestek, a decorative sheepskin mats, which were already in decline before the conflict.
Yes, sorry, I'm here.
Yeah, could you continue? Yes, so we are the role of
the role of craftsmanship in community stability. Displaced artisans found relief in crafting even while in temporary shelters. They also observed different regional crafting techniques in host villages, expanding their skills and reinforcing their cultural identity during forced migration. And post-conflict recovery and craft revival efforts. In 2024, a carpet-making center was established in Aksai village through international and local support, providing livelihoods for 40 women artisans. This initiative exemplified how cultural heritage can be a tool for post-conflict recovery and economic sustainability.
Ruslan?
Yes, broader implications, lessons from Batken's craft losses. Batken's case reflects a global trend where border conflicts disrupt traditional crafts, but also cross-community relations, local trade networks, and interethnic cultural exchanges. The destruction of homes and workshops in 2022 severed ties between Kyrgyz and Tajik artisans, who previously traded raw materials and shared design motifs. The loss of craftsmanship extends beyond economic hardship. It erodes embedded knowledge systems, weakens social cohesion, and accelerates the decline of endangered craft traditions like knowledge of making pestek and supara.
And this study underscores the urgency of adaptive safeguarding frameworks to integrate displaced artisans into recovery programs, reconnect severe trade networks, and document endangered crafts at risk of disappearance. Without such measures, conflicts will continue to not only displace people, but also fragment their cultural heritage, leaving irreversible gaps in traditional knowledge transmission. So we are finishing our presentation.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much to Gulnara, Aisha, Ruslan, and Mirlan. And please forgive me my very bad pronunciations of your names. I'm sure I'll try to improve that for the next when we see each other next time.
Thank you.
A very wonderful intervention from you. Our next speaker is from Colombia and represents the NGO Teye Teye. Adriana Correa will present for us the impact of the Colombian armed conflict on Teye and Naka people, intangible cultural heritage. So, Adriana, the floor is yours. You can share your screen now. Yeah, Adriana, are you there? Okay, so we will leave Adriana for a little while, and we can, in the meantime, we can take another presenter, and Sarah Green. Are you here, Sarah? She represents the NGO Art for Refugees in Transition, ART, and Sarah is also the chair of the NGO Forum's working group on conflict and displacement. In the HeritageAlive journal, about when the topic was storytelling, Sarah wrote a wonderful article from a Burmese refugee camp. But today, Sarah will share her experience from the Daesheh refugee camp in the West Bank in Palestine. So, Sarah, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hello. Good afternoon to most of you. Good morning to those on the East Coast. I'm trying to share my PowerPoint, and I hope it. There we go.
It's successful.
There we go.
Great.
Okay. So I'm the Executive Director of Art for Refugees in Transition, and we work with refugees, displaced, marginalized communities around the world, helping them to rebuild community through their cultural heritage. As Janet noted earlier, as you can see, the world is population of displaced persons is growing exponentially. At the moment, well, we can say almost 1 in every 69 people worldwide has been forcibly displaced. And what we wanted to bring to light here and through this wonderful webinar is the importance of safeguarding living heritage. As you know, it's often overlooked in the process of reconstruction that follows after war and natural disaster. And in this case, we're talking about armed conflict. Many times people don't think about the importance, not just preserving the culture, but what it does for the people themselves. And so I ask each of you, some who are living in conflict zones and some who are not, to think about what inside of you gives you your identity and what gives you your sense of community and who put it there. The thing that is closest to your heart. And mostly it's the older generation, your grandparents or your parents or your community. And when you are in your deepest, darkest place, where do you go? You go to that place that holds your identity. And we know that our heritage is linked to this. And so the importance of recognizing this, the importance of perpetuating your cultural heritage can help communities rebuild when they've been displaced because of conflict. And in 2021, we started a program in the Daesheh refugee camp in Palestine, in the West Bank. Now, the camp was established in 1949 as the result of the Palestinian War. And it was originally built for 3,000 refugees in 1949. Now, in 2025, there are over 19,000 refugees in that camp. So you can imagine how this has expanded. The program that ART started was to work with elders and younger generations in the traditional Palestinian embroidery craft called tetriz. Now, tetriz is a traditional Palestinian embroidery craft that has been practiced in Palestinian villages for generations. and it serves both to preserve and celebrate Palestinian culture. And in 2021, Tetris was inscribed on the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage. And I believe even was part of the group that wrote the inscription. The tradition with Tetris is for mothers, grandmothers, mothers, and daughters to sit around a table over a cup of tea and stories and learn this beautiful craft. Each of the designs have a meaning. They come from separate regions. And as this is being taught down to the younger generation, the stories of their heritage are also passed down. Unfortunately, there was a gap where women and children were not learning. And this was something that was held solely by the older generation. And when we started our program, it was during the time of COVID. And people were stuck in their homes with nothing to do, and you had multiple generations. So we organized a program where the grandmothers and the mothers and the daughters would all sit together and learn not just how to use a needle and how to thread it and how to create these beautiful designs, but also the stories behind this culture and this heritage. What we heard from the parents and the children, these are some pictures of workshops we did once COVID ended. And you can see the children, their excitement at learning how to embroider, what it means. Some of them embroidered their names. To know that this was part of their culture, that this was part of their heritage and part of their identity that was being lost. And when you are in a refugee camp, when you have been displaced because of conflict, the sense of identity and community is what will keep you moving forward. And so we found that the women continued after we closed our programming due to the current war in 2023, continue to teach this in their homes to the children. So I want to thank Even and Rachel and Janet and the Norwegian Crafts Institute for giving voice and attention to a very, very important topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Sarah. It's I think your experience here is really valuable for us and very important. The situation I can see now that our friends from Colombia, Adriana Correa and Cesar, are here now. So probably they are able to take the floor and to have their presentation. Can you take your presentation away, Sarah? Could you shut it down? Yeah. So Adriana, are you there? And Cesar, I saw you were here.
Yes, good morning. We are here.
Buenos días. ¿Cómo están?
Good to see you. So, can you also share your screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see it already?
Well, it looks a bit dark. Ah, now it's there. Everything is fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor for us to be here We will be presenting the case of the impact of the Colombian armed conflict on the Naka people's intangible cultural heritage. A little bit about us. We are Teje. We are a non-profit civil association founded in 2005. We are from Colombia, and we work to preserve intangible cultural heritage, to protect the environment, and promote sustainable development, mainly of indigenous communities. We have been working with the Naka or Chimilas since 2007. And in 2015, we supported the elaboration of a study aiming to analyze the impact of conflict in this community for a land restitution claim. The photograph that you see to the right was taken during one of the sessions with the elders board regarding this investigation. A little bit of context about the Naka people. This community's history is marked by dispossessional territorial defense since the Spanish conquest. They were located at the Colombian Caribbean. And as you see in the photos, these were their traditional outfits and houses. Over the last 45 years, during the Colombia's armed conflict, they have been affected by systematic violations of human rights by different armed groups, such as guerrillas, paramilitaries, and criminal gangs. The Colombian state has made important efforts to recognize and protect this community, and even in 2009, the Constitutional Court issued an order for claiming or demanding their urgent protection. Violence against these indigenous communities and in their territories is a long list of different violations, as you can see on the list to the left. And the different, and as you see in this graph, there are different groups who have been having presence in the territory. First, the guerrillas in red, then different paramilitary groups, and then criminal gangs. And over these 45 years or 50 years, their territory has also been affected by a huge reduction of forests, as you can see in the green line. Also a new harvest of African palm africana, and also a huge and extensive cattle grazing, which has turned all the territory into big lands and losing a lot of forests. Regarding all these different actions and victimizations have caused cultural and territorial impacts. For example, they have lost an important part of their territory, and as you know, their territory is the base for their survival and their culture. Their sacred sites have been desecrated and restricted. Their traditional practices have been limited, affecting their organizations and their autonomy. Community ceremonies and assemblies were prohibited, and the community also lost their language and cultural expressions due to repression and forced displacement. To the right, we have a photo of the women weavers of the community. Also, there have been important impacts on their social structures. For example, their indigenous authorities have been weakened because armed groups have imposed their control and their norms. Killings of wise men and elders have disrupted their cultural transmission and caused forced displacement. The person you see to the right is Mr. Felipe Granados, who is one of the chiefmen of the Ete community, of the major chieftain of the Ete and Naka people. Also, all this impact has caused them to undermine their self-determination and governance. And there have been victims of forced recruitment, mainly of young people, affecting family structures and youth participation and weakening cultural identity. Conflict has also impacted the environment and livelihood destruction. There have been armed confrontations between the different groups in the territory, which have caused blood shedding and a lot of deaths in the communities. This blood shedding not also impacts to the person that is killed or victimized, but also it has a symbolic impact in the community, because those places cannot be used again after there has been blood shedding in them. Their traditional houses and crops, called cañas, were destroyed. They have lost animals, hunting and gathering practices, and they have lost traditional seeds. They have seen, in general, their food sovereignty and autonomy weakened. The images that you see to the right are part of a process that we have been working with the community to restore their traditional cañas or harvesting systems. In conclusion, the Colombia's internal armed conflict has profoundly impacted the Ete and Naka people's cultural heritage, disrupting their tradition, their self-governance, and their livelihood strategies. Therefore, there is an urgent need for cultural restoration, land protection, and legal recognition. After the study we did in 2015, a land restitution judge ordered several actions as part of a sentence. It ordered to restore their territorial rights, including land titling, actions for the environmental recovery, support of return processes for IDPs, and research about human rights violation. It also established the need to implement a collective reparation plan, and it demanded to advance cultural strengthening process and the protection of sacred sites. It's worth saying that this community's collective reparation plan is one of the 445 indigenous collective plans that are currently implemented in Colombia. And just to close, if you want to learn more about this community and about our work with them, you can visit our website. Most of our content is both in English and Spanish, so you can learn more about what we have done with them, such as this publication which explains the sacred sites of the ancient territory of the Ete and Naka people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adriana and Cesar. I have a question for you. Can you what does it mean, Taye Taye, the name of your NGO?
Oh, it's like tejer is weaving, so it's kind of weaving, because we started as a process working with indigenous weaver, and we are trying to weave community.
Okay.
So
thank you for your explanation and for your wonderful presentation. So,
I think we need to mute. Can we ask to mute iPad Pro, please?
Yes. The next presenter, thank you to Adriana and Cesar. The next presenter is Okello Quinto. So Okello, he's their friend and a long-time member of the HeritageAlive editorial board, and he represents the NGO Gulu Theatre Artists from Uganda. As Sarah, Okello also contributed with a wonderful article in the HeritageAlive journal about storytelling. And in his presentation, he will share their experience from what happened after the armed conflict and their challenges with revitalizing the Akoli indigenous culture. So, Okello, The floor is yours. Can please our friends from Arts and Culture share?
Yeah, I want to begin by greeting everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the bottom of my heart, and I want to sincerely begin by appreciating very much the government of Norway for organizing this very important event, which has actually brought all of us together. And secondly, I want to appreciate very much the initiative of the organizer for making this event becoming a successful one. My name is Quinto Ukelo, the managing director of Gulu Theatre Artists based in northern part of Uganda. I am here with my presentation entitled After the Harm Conflict, Revitalizing Actually Indigenous Culture. To begin with, let me give you a little bit of the background of my organization, if it could be. Can I have that? Yes, please. Thank you. Yeah, I belong to an organization called Gulu Theatre Artists, which is a cultural development organization founded in 1997 with its primary objectives with endeavor to build pride and confidence, heal wounds and broken hearts, build unity in diversity, and believe in happiness where everyone is mindful and respectful to one another. That is among many other primary objectives. Gulu Theatre Artists also safeguards actually cultural heritage through several means, among which include performing arts, which entail music, dance, and drama. Since its existence, Gulu Theatre Artists has been working very closely to implement government programs and non-governmental organization activities that involves community mobilization and sensitization. But above all, it is one of the accredited NGOs to implement the 2003 UNESCO Convention. If I could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. On a sad note regarding the ICS harm conflict, I want to bring to the attention of everybody that actually community suffered for over 20 years during that prolonged political war in northern Uganda, to the extent that they were packed into a people's displacement camps. And these are the very unfortunate and disadvantaged generation who grew up in a no-peace zone for 2 decades, during which the age-long wisdom of educating through pleasure was completely abandoned. We have forcefully abandoned the tested practices that kept all the stored information alive. Our method of education, where everybody was a teacher to everybody help anywhere, at any time, of appropriate activities, were not only abandoned, but also branded evil and primitive. We started actually mistakenly believing that learning takes place only when you pay money or you get isolated from the rest of the population, or you go to a school classroom or in front of any trained teacher who only regulates books, theory in foreign lands about assumption situation. All this came up with a lot of challenges, among which we realized that the results are so catastrophic that the majority of the population who were completely traumatized and not so lucky to go to school by then have put down their tools. Their confidence is completely shattered. They have been actually made to believe that since they are not learned, they are incapable of and irrelevant to the process of solving any problem. And they are therefore waiting for the so-called learned people to come and magically solve all the human problems. You'll be seeing those pictures on the other side, how the camps look like and the kind of problem we went through. On the other hand, the so-called land, which form the minority, are having no practical solution due to lack of comprehensive knowledge. This I mean both the informal and formal knowledge to shoot down all our development problems. They do, however, despise the traditional methods and rely on the modern methods of information dissemination, such as the reading, writing, radio, televisions, telephones, computers, and workshops, for example. But all these are myths and mockery to the majority of the population. And the results are total apathy, because there is no effective communication between the two classes. The believers of the modern life, which definitely contaminated the true origin and the traditional believers. This brought in that element of being very antagonistic than complementary within the very ongoing society. And when you look at this picture here, you see the traditional believer trying actually to rebuild hope. In as far as intervention is concerned, you realize that in response to the 2003 UNESCO Convention implementation measure and the comprehensive research result that we did, Gulu theater artists as recommended music, dance, and drama as being one of the best communication media, which cuts across all mankind, regardless of sex, color, land, or you are illiterate, any form of impairment, maybe young or old, but it is a mechanism which brings together all forms of humanity. So it is therefore the desire and the commitment of everyone to use music, dance, and drama and other cultural practices in order to rekindle the candle of hope and stimulate a new declaration among the population to wake up and face the human challenges with a concrete belief that we can and must be part of the solution to our own problems. And this could only be achievable if this active young generation, in consultation with the knowledgeable and elderly people, are fully involved in creating the awareness. But I want to bring to your attention that long ago, Africa of all generations have survived on the knowledge that is stored in and disseminated through songs, dance, poems, ritual, proverbs, visual arts, and wise saying. Because even the technology of the blacksmith, the clinical procedure of the doctors, the food production and the story techniques, the health marriages, midwifery, childbearing and rearing, communication with the supernatural being, the environmental protection, and many others were all preserved by and disseminated through the performing arts and ritual. And you can see those people actually performing some ritual. If I can go to the next slide. Thank you. In our recommendation, good theater artists wish to very highly recommend the intervention to rekindle confidence and self-esteem to the entire community, that there is need actually to promote the belief that modern and traditional knowledge practices and method of communication are not mutually exclusive. They are instead symbolic and complementary. There cannot be real development unless the two are integrated to curb down the ICS harm conflict. We would like to prove that even the great idea can be conveniently communicated to anyone or everyone in a manner that is very simple, very interesting, very friendly, familiar, attractive, and is affordable through the use of song, the dance, poetry, drama, and exhibitions, which are part of the rich and entertaining culture. We also believe that entertainment helps the learner to curb down stress and positively help in faster assimilation and longer retention of knowledge. And we are also, as part of the community, we are also doing a lot in terms of identifying, documenting, mapping, and restoring all the ITS for the upcoming generation for cultural sustainability. And you can see on your right, the pictures actually trying to make things entertaining, but also communicating a lot of messages. The next slide maybe. Yeah. Also, the cultural bearers, the knowledgeable people must be integrated in the formulation of a development model. Masses, the war effect has brainwashed community mind. We are all aware that globally, all forms of effective communication tools are being used to address these chronic challenges, eroding our cultural value. But it is very important that we, the indigenous community, must know and answer the following question as I conclude my presentation. What role can we, the affected population, play in the development of our own community? That question needs to be answered. The second question is, where did our development process go wrong? And what were the causes of the downfall of our cultural heritage and social structure? Finally, what solution can we offer to address all these challenges? I want to thank you once again for listening to me, and that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Okello, for your really interesting presentation. It's always a pleasure to listen to you sharing your experiences. The next speaker is representing the NGO Association of Folk Artists in Poland. It's Hanna Schreiber. I'm sure that most of you know her from before. She's an active member, and she has been an active member of the NGO Forum for many, many years. And her presentation is based on lessons learned from the first ICH training delivered for the Polish military. Can one integrate cross-cultural awareness and ICH into military training? Hanna will here share her experiences working with the Polish armed forces. So, Hanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eivind, and congratulations to organizers. It's really an honor to address you and to be able to speak to you today. Can you see my presentation? Okay, yes. Maybe now it's better.
Yeah. Much.
Okay, so I would like to introduce maybe a little bit of my own experiences, because I have a life before 2003 convention, and this life, yeah, I can't imagine myself, but this life included my fascination with the Hague Convention 1954 and with the experiences of protecting cultural heritage in the operations that time in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was that time trained as a civil military expert and had a very unique opportunity to cooperate with the military and also to train the military when it came to the Hague Convention. But what was particularly interesting for me, having been in the field of intangible cultural heritage for so many years, on how it really connects with the concepts already known to the military. And I would like to address today these experiences and tell you a little bit more. First of all, I would like to maybe say some obvious things, but maybe not so obvious for NGO field. Armed forces are highly trained, well-prepared structures who assess all the time the methods and ways of their engagement. That makes them also a very important partner for us, for civil sector, especially in the growing global uncertainty and in the global rise in conflicts where armed forces are intervening or they are supporting or they are engaged in different ways. My own experience started with the multinational experiment 6, which was an experiment integrated by NATO, and it was based on the that time reflections on the failures of Western forces in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And one of the identified failures was the lack of cultural awareness, the ignorance, and the growing problems related to the cooperation with the local population. So this is the structure of the experiment. I just want to give you the idea on how it was organized. So it took 2 years. I'm not sure if my screen is not probably, let's check it now. So it took 2 years to develop the document proposals, to verify the adopted solutions, and prepare the final versions of documents and their delivery to armed forces. And this was also a time when we were discussing on whether armed forces are prepared at all to deal with cultural differences. And if they are prepared to deal with these cultural differences with respect that shall be paid despite the military operation. So the important area that was addressed during this huge multinational experiment, and this multinational experiment is a series of experiments going on in the NATO forces, was the exchange of information between military and civilian participants of the operation. And the very important goal was to create shared situational awareness among coalition and partner forces by understanding the cross-cultural situation. And it came to me after I entered the field of the 2003 convention, how much the respect for cultural identity of local population is at the heart of respecting the intangible cultural heritage. So it came to me also that this is something to build upon. If we are approaching the military with our ideas of intangible cultural heritage, which for them sounds usually very unfamiliar, because intangible cultural heritage as a concept is still a concept that we must raise awareness about, we can use a different term, a different aspect, which is present in the trainings of all military forces in the world. It is the concept of cultural awareness and cross-cultural awareness. I have dedicated my research that time to these issues, and this is my PhD thesis that was focused on this cross-cultural awareness concept. I was that time interviewing and discussing these issues with the military, and just to give you the definitions that were established during this experiment, the cultural awareness and cross-cultural awareness, quite simple definitions, operational for the military. And I would like to draw your attention to the issue of cultural awareness, which is the ability to become aware of our own cultural values, beliefs, and convictions. And then cross-cultural awareness, which is the ability to become aware of the other, the cultural values, beliefs, and convictions that differ from our own. And sometimes we mix this terminology, but it is important that, maybe it sounds very obvious, but in order to understand the other, we need to understand who we are. And this resulted in the training program for Polish Armed Forces, which was before this experiment rather limited to several hours. After this experiment, it expanded to 2 weeks program focused on cultural awareness and cross-cultural awareness. And we had an experience that especially the soldiers who were coming from the missions and were deployed again, they were the best participants, because they exactly knew why they need to understand how to communicate properly, what is the impact of the respect shown to a local population on their own safety. And we came back to this idea in September in 2024 in Wrocław. There is a military international center for training and research on cultural heritage in danger, and we organized there together the first ever training for the military forces on ICH. And this was the key to come back and to show the bridge between these two ideas. But by safeguarding ICH, we show the respect to other cultures. We also protect the safety of all actors involved. And we had the great pleasure to have Dr. Fumiko Hinata opening the conference and addressing the audience. We had obviously a panel dedicated to Ukraine, which we fully support in this horrific war. And we also had a series of workshops integrating together civil experts with military experts. And it was an amazing exchange and very, very hot discussions about how we can cooperate on these issues. And let me just give you some idea on what were the main concepts of the conference and the main results of the workshop. The conference was dedicated to 3 areas: the context of war in Ukraine, and thanks to Alexandr, we could host Oksana Humeniuk from Ukraine. It was very interesting to see how military experts were framing intangible cultural heritage as a concept relevant for their own traditions, and about the thinking about what is their ICH in this regard. And then we also were using the lessons learned from other regions of the world, including Yemen, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And then the workshop, which was the most important for us, because this was the place of discussions, this was the place where we could really brainstorm about the problems. And not surprisingly, obviously for you, the first identified issue was the difficulty in defining ICH due to limiting understanding of the concept. This is still a very obvious thing, but we need to raise awareness all the time, everywhere, with all possible stakeholders. And for us, the first important thing was to show the operational principles and modalities for safeguarding ICH in emergencies, because operational principle number 5 speaks exactly about involving armed forces as important stakeholders in safeguarding ICH. So it was a bridge for us to show them that they are mentioned there, that they are also important for us, but we have to discuss it together. But obviously, this discussion is only in the beginning. We had still the insufficient awareness, insufficient funding, and the real absence of civil-military cooperation mechanisms. However, the most important Result was the reply to these problems. We discussed about adapting legislation and policy to meet current needs, to show the relevance of intangible heritage as a space of our identities for national securities. It is an issue of also the ongoing crisis and wars that we see how ICH is being attacked, and we need to think about how to secure it, not only by saying, by really integrating it into security plans. There was also an issue of the promotion of the transmission and preservation of intangible heritage by spreading relevant knowledge and skills. And I think that this webinar will really contribute to this. And I'm really, really thankful for all previous speakers. The challenging stereotypes and actively promoting the values of tolerance and respect for other cultures present also within the military. We seem to think about military as a homogeneous structure, but the cultural diversity is also within the military. We had this discussion in Poland about the Polish soldiers who are Muslims, who are Jewish, and who also would like, or who are and who also would like to practice openly, and are doing it openly in the military. And obviously the issues of thinking about proper procedures, plans, integrating civilian and military within the spirit of civil-military cooperation to protect intangible cultural heritage. The meeting was really, it covered almost 100 people. More details you can find also on the website of my UNESCO chair, ICHgovernance.com. We had a representative of NGOs, of monuments conservators. It was really a very good starting point for thinking about new stakeholders for ICH protection in crisis and wars. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And thank you for your really interesting presentation. I think it's wonderful to hear how all these presenters, now we have 7 presenters, they are sharing their complementary experience and reflections, and the way this is filling out the broader picture of today's topic. So thank you to all of you. Now, before we wrap up the meeting, I would like to give the floor to Rachel Jeffrey, which is the editor-in-chief for the HeritageAlive, and she's currently working very hard, I know, with our next publication on basketry. And this publication is going to be presented at the 20th COM, so we all look forward to that. She represents the NGO NAKS Suriname, and I must say she has been a vital part of this organizing committee of today's event. So please let me give the floor to Rachel so that she can provide her valuable reflections over the day and try to summarize it in a beautiful way that I know that only she can do. So Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Thank you to all the NGOs who have been participating, who have presented their experiences, shared their experiences with us. I know for a fact that this has been a quite interesting, engaging, but mostly, I think, empowering webinar as well, because it has helped us to understand ICH in the middle of war and conflict from a complete different angle. So I definitely want to compliment the presenters and thank them again for sharing this valuable information with us. I am aware of the time. I do not want to take too much of your time because the presenters have already shared sufficient information. All I want to do is just to quickly summarize what has been discussed today, just so that you can have an overall view of what we were aiming with this webinar. So just quickly, and I hope that it is properly showing as well. I'm not going to aim to do it in slideshow because I have horrible experiences with that. But just to quickly summarize what we have discussed today, I think that Janet, our keynote speaker, really set the tone for this webinar, where she beautifully presented to us the devastation of ICH, the importance of safeguarding ICH in the middle of armed conflict, war, displacement, but she also managed to show us a sight of hope, right? She spoke about the impact of ICH on social life, the way how it disrupts continuation through generations, but also how destructive it is towards a material object and the important loss of knowledge. But she highlighted for us how much it is needed for us to fill in the gaps, especially since the international humanitarian law basically fails to properly focus on the human aspect when it comes to safeguarding ICH in war and conflict. I love the fact that she gave us this, how do you say it, this light of hope, where she also demonstrated how ICH helps to prevent, helps to rebuild, helps to provide, but also allows to recreate. And I know for a fact that we have all seen this coming through in all the presentations. That's why it's easy for me to summarize what each presentation has help us to understand, beginning with Ukraine, where Ukraine basically, what stood out there was this important reflection, which they also stated as a question to us, whether we want to look at these communities as empowered or enforced. And I think this is one reflection that we should take away with us, and try to wrap our mind around this idea, whether it is an empowered community or whether we talk about an enforced community, especially in the case of displacement. But they also spoke very, they also showed us very vivid examples of loss, how a loss of ICH through war, what the impact is, the deep impact that it creates. One that really stood to me was the loss of bearers, right? In wars, in conflicts, lives are lost. However, with these lives goes away those who bear the knowledge as well. But also one important thing that I think came through in the presentation for Ukraine was if the ICH still is the same, right? Displacement, how it actually impacts the ICH, how there are other elements added to the ICH, and then the question whether it is still the same. But a beautiful example is how ICH became a tool for peace building, right? But also how it provided comfort, security, exactly what Janet discussed in her presentation as well. When we look at the example of Kyrgyzstan, then they have given us insight in how ICH helps to structure daily life and how it continues to provide security and safety, even though these communities are facing adversity on a daily basis, yet it creates this unity in communities, but also provides opportunities for these communities to continue to build on their own ICH. I think the displacement led to the loss of material objects and how valuable that is, how valuable material objects are within ICH, but also the connection to sacred spaces. This is a continued element that we have seen through all the presentations, the importance of sacred spaces and how these are impacted by the laws, right? But also the disappearance of skills, again, craftsmanship, how that disappears throughout the whole process of conflict, but also the process of being displaced, being disrupted, uprooted. If we go to Colombia's presentation, which is one that really hit home, because in Suriname we have also faced a civil war, and this is where we see the loss of autonomy, and these communities being how do you say it, impacted, not able to utilize their own voice, but also the restricted access to sacred spaces. More importantly, the way how the sacred rules in these spaces are being disrupted, disrespected. And I think this is where Hannah's example of educating those who are leading the conflict to understand what those rules are that are embedded in these communities. I think it was quite interesting to see how major the devastation can be in freely expressing and embodying the ICH. I think that's definitely one thing that Janet referred to when she spoke about the international humanitarian law failing to really capture the essence of why safeguarding ICH is of importance. Sarah's example on the Palestinian refugee camp, that's where we saw creativity really coming through, despite placement. That's what I saw, despite placement. A perfect example of how ICH resides in us and is part of our identity. So we carry it with us, no matter the displacement. We continue to carry it with us. But I think in Sarah's presentation, it also came through the role of older generations transmitting to the younger generation. And that's where we see the importance of having our bearers of that knowledge with us. In Sarah's case, it was really the women teaching the older women, the grandmothers, teaching the mothers and the daughters. That's this line of transmitting down the ICH, which is also important to be safeguarded in the whole process of facing war and conflict. And then, of course, we have seen the example of Uganda, which has provided us insights in what happens post-war, because we tend to look at ICH in the middle of war, in the middle of armed conflict. However, that process of rebuilding, reestablishing is also one that takes time, that also requires ICH to be kept in how do you see it, high regard. And I think Mr. Okello's presentation showed us a beautiful example of how a community who is facing post-war stage in the need of rebuilding, how they need this ICH as a backbone to support the rebuilding stage and really to bring together those generations, especially if it is in the case of a war taking centuries, right? Ages, spread over 20 years, etc. That's where you will have different generations with different experiences. And this is where Okello's example showed us how the ICH can bring back these generations, but also cut through modernity and reunite the different generations. And then I have to say, I was really impressed by Hannah's presentation, because if we look at ICH, if we look at war and conflict, we immediately think about the communities that are affected. However, those who are present in those communities to really take care of the safety of the displaced communities, but also the affected communities, that's also one to take in consideration, because they are basically also uprooted, also placed in an environment, in a space that is not theirs. and they also carry their own ICH with them. So this beautiful example of utilizing ICH as a tool of education to raise awareness, to facilitate mutual respect, but also to provide a platform where cross-cultural interaction can happen, where there is an understanding of the other, right? A total understanding of who the other is, why the other is as they are, and how to live with the other. That's also where we have learned that ICH can help to anticipate and create a less severe and harsh environment, especially when it comes to situations of crisis, where there is the importance to sort of control the impact of this crisis. Well, this is basically my short, how do you say it? I just have to stop sharing. There we go. I haven't even asked if the slides were moving. Was it moving? Was everyone able to see all the slides? Oh,
They moved very well.
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So this is my 2 cents on the presentations. I couldn't have done a better job than you guys did. This was also a learning experience for us as the team who've decided to facilitate a platform where our NGOs could share their experiences. And as Ivan said, we are so hopeful that we can continue to facilitate this awareness. And there is one important news that I don't feel I should share as the editor-in-chief. I do want to give that, how do you say it, that honor to our chair, who is doing a tremendous job in carrying on the legacy of HeritageAlive. So Ivan, I am going to give you the floor to share the beautiful news, exciting news, and help us to end on a high note.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you for your very good summary of the meeting. You must have been working very hard, but I'm very happy that we can come together and throw light on this together on this very important topic, and that we can, unfortunately, very important topic right now. So, well, the situation is that the next steps is that we had a little discussion with ISCAP. ISCAP is, as you know, the Category 2 Center for Asia and the Pacific, and we had a wonderful cooperation with them for many, many years. They have been our partner for publishing the HeritageAlive journal, the Living Heritage series. And now we have been discussing if we could do an extra, because this was not really planned. So this was not in the original budgets or anything. So, but we have discussed if it would be possible to make an extra publication of HeritageAlive with ICH and armed conflicts because it's so important right now. So. Well, we have a good dialogue with ISCAP, and hopefully, it looks like now that this can be reality and that we can materialize this publication and present it at the General Assembly in 2026. So that is really, really good news. So we are so thankful for this great cooperation that we have with ISCAP. So this is great, but we have to discuss, and then it will also, now we have seven interventions now, but there will of course be room for more than 7 articles in the publication. So there will be a call. We will do a call. We have to make a very rough selection for today, but there will be a call for some extra articles. But this, I think, is just, I'm very happy with that. I would also like to say that to direct a great thank to all the presenters, to Rachel, of course, for her wonderful summary, to all the presenters for your great work. I think this has been very complimentary and filled out the picture in a really interesting way. Thanks to all of the people who has attended the meeting, and also a special thanks to Janet, who could unfortunately not be present today, but we think of her, and luckily she made her presentation on video, so we could listen to her even if she could not be present. And well, we had some technical issues, just small ones on the way, but that's in a way that's how it should be. And I'm very happy the way that this was very professional managed by the Arts and Crafts Norway. And so thank you, a special thanks to them for taking us through this technological challenges on the way. So with these words, I would like to say thank you all for coming. And I hope to see all of you at the next committee meeting in New Delhi in December. And in New Delhi, we are going to present our next publication on basketry. And I want you to do me a favor while we are thinking of this, because now we know that we are going to have a publication on basketry, and we are probably going to have on ICH in armed conflicts. But what we will discuss when we meet next time in New Delhi, we will discuss a possible new topic for the next HeritageAlive journal. So please use the time and think if you have some really good ideas, what should be the topic of the next publication. So with these words, I wish you a wonderful week, and thank you for coming, and thank you to all the presenters. Yeah, thank you.